Picture frames, that's a pretty normal woodworker project. I make quite a few of them. The idea here was to make some jigs for standard size picture frames that would let me both make the frame if I want to, and also decorate the frame, add some inlays and whatnot to the frame. So I'm starting off with some MDF. The MDF is being cut so it just fits inside a standard frame. The one I'm making right now is a big frame. It's going to be for photos or artwork that is 20 inches by 30 inches. So the opening on a frame that size is going to be a little under 20 by 30. It's going to be like 19 and a half by 29 and a half. And I think I cut this a ½ inch less than that. I don't have the exact dimensions, but it's going to drop right inside a picture frame. So what I'm doing here is taping it up with shaper tape because I'm going to use my shaper origin I can use it to make the frame, but more importantly for this project, I'm going to use it for decorations. And the idea here is I'm making these reusable. So every time I want to make a 20 by 30 frame, I will have that jig. You cover it up with shipping tape on the shaper tape, just clear shipping and packing tape to just give it a little more longevity so you don't wear out the shaper tape. What I do when this interior part, this part that goes on the inside of the frame, is all taped up and ready, is I'm going to stick it down on a piece of plywood. Again, the plywood's going to be reusable. That's a bit larger than the outside of the frame I want to make. Here I'm just holding the plywood down to my workbench, but that's not glued or anything. It's just going to be removable. And then the part that's taped up for the shaper tape will just get stuck down on that piece of plywood. So the whole thing together, the shaper tape portion, the MDF in the middle, and the plywood on the outside will make the jig, and those pieces will just stay together. And here I'm lining it up with the piece of the wood I'm going to use for the frame just to make sure there's room all around it. I want to be able to have the frame supported by the spoilboard all the way around it. On this particular one, I used the shaper to cut the miters for the frame. It worked. I came up with a square frame, but it wasn't a super tight, nice fit. I wasn't really crazy about the results. I need to kind of debug that and just see what I did wrong, that it didn't turn out perfectly. In theory, it ought to be perfect. But in any event, I wasn't, like I say, super crazy about how the frame came out, and I'll show you that. Here I am just bringing in the parts for the frame. It's kind of like, it kind of got a dovetail design in the miters, and like I say, it worked, but the dovetails didn't fit super tight. There's some gaps in there. They just don't look all that great. So functional, yeah. Aesthetic, not that great. But, the whole point of a picture frame is, of course, the aesthetics. So here I am just cutting those miters, and I'll show you what the finished product looked like. I'm not going to show you cutting all of these. What I did like about this jig, and I ended up making a smaller version of it for 16 by 20 inch prints, is using this as a way to put the decorations in the frame. So the second one I'm going to show you has some pretty intricate decorations, and it actually ended up really nice, and I think this was a successful idea and successful project for a frame jig, even though I really wasn't crazy about the miters that you can see me cutting here. Anyhow, here's the frame all assembled, and I'll get a close-up and just show you what I mean by just some gaps. I mean, it's okay, right? It looks decent, but there's just some little holes in the corners where the pieces didn't come together perfectly. But it did come out quite square. I mean, I'll give it that. It wasn't off square. That's probably the worst one right there. You can see that pretty big gap. So here I'm using it as a jig for the decorations. I'm putting double-sided tape around the outside on my spoil board Then I'm going to drop the frame down onto the double-sided tape to keep the frame, in place so it doesn't move around relative to that tape board that's in the middle of the frame. On this first one, the 20 by 30 frame, I just opted for a pretty simple design. It's kind of just some straight lines that are inlaid. You can see them there. They kind of crisscross in the corner, a little bit of a basket weave effect. And I'll show you. I mean, it came out okay. It worked perfectly well in terms of, accurately cutting the channels to put those pieces in. I don't know. I don't think the design it wasn't all that great. It just didn't turn out, as a wonderful piece of work. It's okay. I mean, I would call it successful, just not great. You can see what I'm doing with the shaper origin here. I can just go over with the shaper origin and cut those channels, and they're very accurate. It keeps them nice and straight. I could have actually done this decoration just with a standard router table, since these are just straight slots that I'm going to inlay some straight pieces into. But again, I can use this same tape board setup for any kind of intricate designs that I want, and you'll see I do some more intricate ones later. Here I'm cutting up a couple types of wood. I'm going to use some contrasting wood for the for the inlay on that. I'm actually keeping the inlay proud of the frame, so it has kind of like a 3D feel to it, and I'm letting the ends of the inlay kind of stick out a little bit on the edges. I'll trim them out so they're even, but even with each other, but they actually kind of go out beyond the edge of the frame. So that was that one. It was okay. The second one I did, my 16 by 20, here I am putting in a much more intricate design. Same idea. I made this frame just using traditional methods, right? I've used my table saw for the miters. I splined the edges. You can see by my finger there's a little lighter piece of wood that's a spline on that miter. And here I'm cutting in a pretty intricate inlay pattern using the shaper origin. Again, I've got that tape that lets it orient, and you can see I'm just dropping in this pretty intricate and very curvy inlay into that wood. I'm using two types of wood here. The basic frame itself is made out of ipe, which is a Brazilian walnut, very hard stuff. I've got a bunch of it left over from a deck that was demolished. And then the inlay is maple, which is a much lighter in color wood. Here you can see one of the inlay pieces. I've got 3 inlays on two sides on this, so a total of 6 inlays, and they connect to each other, and you'll see in a minute when I zoom out and show the whole frame. So there's kind of 2 floral designs on either end of the frame, and then a vine connecting the 2 with a couple of leaves on the vine. And I'm just going through and kind of making little cuts until it fits with the shaper origin, and I can just shave off another 1/1000th of an inch or what have you. Once I had the basic design in, I took an engraving bit and engraved some details into the vines and the floral work. It's meant to resemble tooled leather just in the design, and actually stole the design from some leather tooling patterns that I came across. So that's how it came out, and it came out pretty. I'll show you another shot once it has some Rubio monocoat on it. But my takeaway is I really like these jigs. I think they worked well. Here it is with the Rubio monocoat, kind of gets nice and shiny. So the jigs worked well. I wasn't crazy about using the shaper to make the miters, but maybe I'll debug that later. In any event, if you like this, please hit the like button. I welcome you to subscribe. Talk to you soon. Bye.